Hi guys, Marian here. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to the full labor and delivery story. I wanted to get into the nitty-gritty, all the details of this little one's birth. We did sort of vlog it like as best as I could, but when I watched that video back, there's definitely like missing chunks about what happened, and I like to just share all the details because I'm such an advocate of women knowing and preparing for birth in a way that encourages them and enables them to know more information. So I just want to share like the real and raw story with you guys. I have two older boys as well, and I've uploaded their birth stories as well, which I'll link. I think my oldest son's birth story was the first video I ever filmed for this channel. If it even still exists, I might have made it private because it was like crazy, but I think it's still up here. Anyway, so it's just really special to be able to be here right now filming this video, have my little 2-week-old here now. So yeah, let's jump in. If you're new to this channel, welcome. My name is Marian and I make videos about being a mom and a Jewish mom, and I have a new little newborn here who I'm absolutely in love with and adore, and it's just been so nice. I actually haven't, for the first time, been thinking about his birth because thankfully I've just been healing so well and he's been doing so well that it feels very much like far in the past and so behind me, even though it was only 2 weeks ago. So I am still in postpartum, I am still healing, and I do want to talk about it while it's fresh in my mind. But spoiler alert, it was amazing. I feel amazing and I'm so thankful for that. Okay, so to get into this little one's birth story, I feel like I just have to give a very brief overview of my first two births. The first, because it'll kind of explain things a little bit better. My oldest son came right on his due date. I thought my water broke. I wasn't exactly sure. Turns out that he was very low, so it might have broke, but like very little water came out. Anyways, but I was having contractions. I thought my water might have broken, so we went to the hospital. We got there in like the evening, and right away like the contractions were way too much for me, so I had an epidural and everything was fine, or so I thought. My son was born the next morning early, and thankfully he was great, but I had unfortunately fractured a part of my spine giving birth, and that's one of kind of like the dangers of an epidural, is you can't feel what's going on. And I also, my bladder froze from the epidural, which basically meant that like I couldn't pee and I had to have a catheter, but the doctors didn't realize that any of that had happened, and I was in extreme amount of pain, and they were just like, sorry, you just gave birth, like it's painful. And because it was my first birth, I had no idea that something like was wrong. I just kept being told that everything was normal. Anyway, so that was a traumatic experience. It took a long time to heal from that, physically and mentally. And I knew that when my second son was coming that I definitely did not want to have an epidural. That time, so I researched a lot into hypnobirthing and had a really positive experience with that. Basically, I started going into labor when he was at 38 weeks. The contractions were just coming on really strong. In the afternoon, evening, we went to the hospital. 2 hours after we arrived, he was born. My water broke just before he came out, and it was a really positive experience. I did have tearing with that birth, and the recovery was a little tough. I think mostly from like the stitches, if I recall, and I gave birth on my back again, so my back hurt a lot. I thankfully didn't fracture anything, and I had a great group of doctors and physical therapists on call that time around. So thankfully I healed pretty quickly from that, but it was still a relatively tougher postpartum experience, way better than the first, so I was just happy about that. But looking back on it now, there were still some hard parts. So this time around with my third baby, I was really convinced he would come early, around 38 weeks as well. He was measuring not big, but on the average to bigger. He was low. I was having a ton of Braxton Hicks. I was having a ton of like Braxton Hicks contractions, or they call it prodromal labor, like labor that doesn't go anywhere. Around that 38-week mark, so I was just like ready for the baby to come. But he had other plans, and he ended up being born on his due date with a scheduled induction. So I kind of wanted to chat with you guys about why I decided to schedule the induction and kind of the details of it, because there's a lot of different ways an induction can go down. And I was still able to deliver him without an epidural, so I was very, very happy with that given my first experience. So I wanted to kind of just share a little bit more about how that happened. So the reason we had scheduled an induction is I was with a midwife / OB practice, so they're very open to like keeping things as natural as possible. I joined that practice after my first birth because I like wanted nothing to do with doctors anymore. So it was great to have like kind of this combined practice. So the midwives are very happy for me to like go as long as I want, but there was a couple like factors that were coming into play. One was my age. I'm over 35, so when you go past term and you're older, things can get more dangerous. Lots of people do it and it's totally fine. It's just there are risk factors for going past 40 weeks. And for me, I was like, I don't want to get into any of that territory. Like, there was no benefit for me for going past my due date. I only saw kind of complications on the horizon. The other factor was because of the pandemic, there was all these things about like having to test negative before my doula would be able to come into the room. And I definitely think for me, I would not have been able to give birth without the epidural, without a doula. The doula is so helpful in just like getting you through each contraction. She would like hold parts of my body. She would suggest positions. She was just like so helpful. And because my second son was born within 2 hours of getting to the hospital, I was very nervous about this COVID test because potentially she wouldn't even be allowed in, and the baby would already be born. So that was another factor just in the back of my mind. The other one was that there were certain midwives that I really wanted to deliver with, and they only worked in the hospital like 1 or 2 days a week. And I kept saying to myself, like, it didn't matter, like I would deliver with whoever I wanted to deliver with, but if I didn't have the midwife, it would be a doctor who I'd never met, and I didn't want to do that again because I'm trying to deliver without the epidural, and it's just, I feel like the midwives are more inclined towards that. So I was nervous about having a doctor I didn't like. And then the other factor was I was group B strep positive, which is basically like a bacteria that's kind of dormant in I think 25% of women who give birth, but you need to have a 4-hour course of antibiotics before you give birth for the baby to be protected. So again, because I had this really fast labor with my second son, I was nervous that if I waited for labor to start naturally and got to the hospital, we wouldn't have time to get the full course of antibiotics. So those were all the factors in play, and that's why I decided to just schedule the induction at 40 weeks on his due date. I thought if he comes before then that's great, that's the way it'll be. But if not, if he's not here by his due date, then I would like to just do an induction. Being 35 years old, I was also being monitored twice a week, really, but doing non-stress tests, doing ultrasound, seeing my doctor. So I had a lot of medical care and a lot of like, I just had a lot of appointments and a lot of like, I don't know, I was just getting stressed. I also had 2 little ones at home, obviously, and I was very nervous that we were gonna like have to go to the hospital in the middle of the night. And even though like their grandparents were around and everything, it just was like an added stressful factor. So that's the backstory. His due date came, and so it's time for the induction. So I got to the hospital at 7 a.m. My husband actually took the kids to their grandparents' house. So okay, sorry, I had to pause for a diaper change. So his due date arrived. We went to the hospital at 7 a.m. to start the induction. Things didn't really even I don't even think I was in a room until like 8:30. Things were moving slow, and I actually was kind of frustrated throughout the day because my goal was to deliver as early as possible because I wanted to get out the next day as early as possible. I really wanted to pick my older kids up from school the next day. I know that's a little crazy, but that's just me. So I was anxious. I was like, come on, let's go, let's go. I really wanted him to be born as soon as possible. Anyways, so the first thing they did, I didn't have to take a COVID test actually because I had been taking PCRs every 3 or 4 days. So I had a valid negative PCR, so that's just some background. I did have to still wear a mask, as did everyone in the room. And I actually would have given birth with the mask. My husband at the very last minute was like, can she take her mask off? And they're like, yeah. But it did not bother me at all. Like, it was the last thing on my mind. I didn't mind it. I don't know why. Anyways, so the first thing they did was start the antibiotics, and my midwife was saying she didn't actually want to get anything started until I'd had at least an hour or two of the antibiotics, because the whole point with doing the induction, you know, was to make sure he got the full dose. So then about 10:30 was when we were like, okay, so what should we do first? And basically she checked me and I was barely dilated. I was 1.5 centimeters dilated and 50% effaced. A lot of people start with this like gel that makes the uterus, or I don't know, Cervidil, I think it's called. It makes you more effaced or like softer. I didn't need that because I was already 50%. It was my third baby. So the next thing that we decided, or the first thing we decided to do, was called a balloon Foley catheter. And it's basically like a little plastic balloon that they put inside you. So the balloon causes you to dilate without any like drugs or anything. So the balloon causes you to dilate without any contractions or any medication. So that is what I wanted to do first, because again, my goal is to like keep everything as natural as possible. So they tried to put in the balloon twice and could not get it in. I don't know if they couldn't get it to the right spot, I think. It was extremely painful. I Googled, and apparently most people find it just like a little bit uncomfortable. I found it extremely painful, I think, because they couldn't get it where it was supposed to go. And it also, I said I thought it scratched my bladder or something. They're like, no, it's not really possible. But it somehow irritated my bladder, or like something that connects to my bladder, because as soon as they're like, okay, this isn't working, I was desperate to pee. I felt like you know, when you're like dying to pee, but nothing came out. And that went on for almost like the next few hours. And it's really unfortunate, because that was the only sort of negative aspect of the labor and delivery. And thank God, after he was born, that whole like feeling and everything was gone. But that was just like a little disruption. It caused me a lot of anxiety because I had that frozen bladder issue with my first son. So that was kind of just unfortunate, because it didn't work. Couldn't do anything with it, and afterwards it was really painful. So that was like the beginning of things, and I was like, oh boy. Next thing that we were gonna do was break my water, because again, just like trying to keep things natural. But my midwife said that I actually wasn't dilated enough to even do that, and because it was so painful and so crazy trying to get this balloon thing in, she's like, I don't recommend that we go that route. So the last thing on the table was Pitocin, which I did not want to do, because Pitocin creates contractions that are that are stronger and more painful than natural contractions. So usually the reason inductions can lead to more and more interventions is like you're just not working with the natural process of things. But I kind of accepted at this point that I was like, okay, whatever it is, it is. If I have to get on that epidural, I will. Let's just start the Pitocin. Like, I obviously didn't want to have a C-section and things like that. Like, I wanted this baby here, so I was like, all right, let's do the Pitocin. So they started the Pitocin at about noon, and they gave me a really low dose, and they increased it every maybe half an hour or hour. And basically from noon until about 4 o'clock, I was just not really feeling much. I was just having the Pitocin increased, and I could tell I was having contractions. I could see them on the monitor, but I really wasn't feeling them. And the thing that I did that I think really helped was I did not get back in that bed until I gave birth. So from noon, when they started the Pitocin, until I gave birth in the evening, I was walking around the room, dancing, swaying, bouncing on the exercise ball the whole time. And that's kind of the best thing you can do in labor to help things get going. Again, that's why an epidural can stall labor, because you're like just lying down in the bed. The best thing for labor is to breathe, like get that baby moving down and move your body. The only tough part was I had not eaten since 6 a.m. They actually said I could have like a little bit of like a bite of lunch and some clear liquids after that, but I was nervous because I just didn't know like when things were gonna kick off. So I did have a bite of turkey and I had some broth. That was about it. But yeah, so that was the only tough part, was I was really hungry the whole time. So at 4 o'clock I called my doula and she came because the contractions, I was definitely starting to feel them. I was still fine for them, but I wanted her in the room. So she came, and then from like 4:30 until 6:30, my midwife and doula kept like checking the machines, and they were like, you're having really strong contractions. My doula was like feeling my stomach. She's like, why are you not in more pain? And I think it was just the hypnobirthing that I had practiced, because I do not have a high pain tolerance at all, but they kept being like you're about to give birth, like these are really strong contractions. And I was just like bouncing on the ball, having a good old time, like not feeling like, I mean, I could feel them, but it was fine. I would just breathe through them. But I was a bit nervous, like, when are things gonna really happen? Because I was like starting to, I was like, I don't get it. The midwife and doula are saying like, I'm about to give birth, that the contractions are really strong, but my body's like so calm. So that was kind of a trip. I was like, well, when's this baby gonna come? And I remember thinking that in my second birth as well. I was like, can someone just tell me like, okay, you have 20 minutes left or whatever? And I know it doesn't work like that, but I wish it did. So by about 6:30, the contractions did become very painful, and I felt like I couldn't breathe through them anymore, and was just like, I was in pain. I kept trying to breathe through because that's the best thing, and I was encouraged by everyone being like, okay, like he's almost here. And then around like 7:15, my doula was like, why don't you get back on the bed? And I was like, yeah, like let's push, let's do this. And at first she said to go on all fours, and I did, and I was like, no. I was like, I'm not giving birth like this. I don't know why. And then thankfully, I don't know who suggested it, if it was the midwife or the doula, but they suggested I go on my side to push. And I'm so thankful for that, because I think that's why I didn't hurt my back this time. So I was on my side. They have this like little thing in the hospital bed to put your leg up on. And I pushed for a good like 20-25 minutes, which definitely was longer than my second son. And I remember just feeling like I could not do it. I was like starving at that point, so I felt like really weak. And the other thing that happened, which I don't know if I mentioned in the vlog video, was I was using a like wireless monitor to monitor the baby. The baby has to be monitored the whole time. And at the very end, he was so low, like he was about to be born, that they couldn't get his heartbeat on the monitor. And that's just like a dangerous time, and they needed him to be able, you know, they needed to be able to get his heartbeat. So they switched me to the wired monitor, which meant that the nurse, because it wasn't attached to me at that point, the nurse was physically holding the monitor on my belly, and I'm trying to push, she's pushing the monitor, I'm like surrounded by people, and I was just like, everyone get away from me. I remember like feeling like I need space, but like those last moments are just crazy. Like I was like, I'm done, I'm not doing this, somebody else give birth to this baby. I remember being like, just cut him out of me, like I am not pushing, I'm not doing this. And then my midwife was just like, we can't get him on the monitor, you just need to push, like push him out. And I think like I stopped kind of spiraling. I was like, okay, I need to do this to make sure this baby gets here. She told me I had to push outside of the contractions even, because they just wanted him out. And I did. It was like enough motivation that I was like, let's just go. And my water broke actually as I was pushing, just like a few minutes before he was born. And I just started crying because it was such a relief to have some pressure gone. And it just like, I was like, oh my gosh, like he's actually coming. He's finally gonna be here. And then when he was born, a ton more water came out, and they said like there was just a ton of water in there, and like he surfed his way out. Like there was just a lot of water, but it was the most intense feeling of relief, because it's like there's so much pressure. I knew I had to like push him out. They use the term ring of fire when he like actually comes out, and you know, I could feel everything. I felt like the tearing, but there's so, I don't know exactly how it happens in labor, but it's not like, there's something happens with the body where you really don't feel it. Like you definitely feel the pressure, but not like the actual tearing, if that makes sense. So just the feeling of relief when his head finally was through, all that water came out. It was just like the most intense, amazing feeling. They put him right on my chest. with every birth, I'm always like panicked that the baby's not okay. So I just was like, I start shaking, which is like a hormone reaction thing after like a traumatic event. But I was just shaking, holding the baby, like crying, being like, is he okay? Is he okay? He was fine. The doctors were there. Like everything was great. But the only tough part was then I had to have stitches for the tearing. Thankfully, the tearing was really not bad. They said it was mostly surface tearing. It was still 2nd degree, but mostly surface, whatever that means. It took a long time to do the stitches, like an hour. I don't know, because time is sort of warped when you're in there. They do give you like injections of numbing stuff, like through a needle, I guess, which is painful to get the needle. So that's the like downside of giving birth without the epidural, is then all the aftermath you don't have any painkillers for. And I remember being like, can I have some Tylenol, please? And they took a while to get it, and they're like, sorry, the pharmacy was slow. I was like, get me the Tylenol now. But yeah, so I think I felt bad for my midwife because I was like shaking so much. I'm holding the baby. She's trying to stitch. You know, it's just crazy. But she did an amazing job. Everything was great. And then we've just been doing so well. Like, it's just been amazing to have a relatively like easy go of postpartum. Like, you know, especially as someone who's experienced the opposite. So yeah, so that's the Induction story. He was born at 7:39. He was big. He was 8 pounds 6 ounces, 21 inches long, and just like super healthy, super strong, a super great eater. And yeah, so I'm just feeling so lucky, so happy to get to share this all with you. I hope for anyone interested in birth and labor and delivery that you enjoyed this video. So that is the story of this little guy's birth. I hope for anyone interested in labor and delivery and birth stuff that you found this interesting. If you have any questions for me, leave them down below and I'll try to answer in the comments. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye!